Welcome to the SAG-AFTRA Foundation's Conversations at Home program. I'm Libby Hill of IndieWire. Before we're joined by our guest today, I want to let you know that the SAG-AFTRA Foundation is a nonprofit organization that relies entirely on donations to provide emergency assistance and free educational programs to SAG-AFTRA artists. This conversation is made possible thanks to the generosity of our supporters. Over the past year, the foundation has given nearly $7 million in COVID relief to more than 7,000 performers. If you are a SAG-AFTRA artist and need help, please ask. And if you can help, please give. Information can be found in the description of this video. Thank you for your support. Now, without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce actors Mackenzie Davis, Matilda Lawler, Danielle Deadwyler, and Himesh Patel of Station 11. Guys, thank you so much for being here today. I have so many questions, so I'm just going to grill you. So just prepare yourselves for that. So let's just get the obvious question out of the way, because this is the thing you're going to be asked in every interview, and I just want to get it off our slate first. Can you talk a little bit about the process of beginning work on this series and then not being able to restart on schedule because there was a killer flu, and both psychologically and as a human being, but also as an actor with regards to your process, what that delay did and the circumstances around the delay?
Well, I guess in terms of starting, I guess I'll start because I guess me and Danielle were the ones who were there at the beginning in Chicago, because we shot episodes 1 and 3 at the beginning of 2020. This was January 2020. And we had a great time because we had no idea what was coming down the line. So, of course, when eventually we took our hiatus, which we were always going to do, and then the plan was to go back to Chicago that summer. It didn't happen. And so by the time we went back and we moved to Toronto at the beginning of this year, or January 2021, the world had completely changed. And in a way, I guess we had to recontextualize everything because of what had happened. The story we were telling never changed. But certainly our relationship to the story changed, and our relationship to the job changed, and our experience of making it was completely different. In terms of my experience from Chicago to Toronto, was completely different, and and it was harder in a way because we couldn't connect with each other in the same ways as we were used to. We did eventually find ways, but it was hard to find those ways. And I've certainly, I didn't find it the easiest thing to do.
No, absolutely. Danielle, is that your experience too?
Mine's a little different. I think Miranda lived in a certain kind of solitude and was pushing for human connectivity pre the flu in the story. And I was living in a weird solitude myself because, I was super aware that there was something coming, that, what we know now as COVID-19 was this pending thing that was spreading the world rapidly. And I remember riding the train in Chicago and hearing about what happened to one of the doctors in the Philippines and being like, yeah, he probably shouldn't eat that donut the way he's eating it on the train out like that. Maybe I should get home quickly. Like all of those things that became what everybody was experiencing when the onslaught of the virus were happening to me in that moment. But at the same time, I'm processing being Miranda, right? And so, Miranda's seeking connectivity and I'm like seeking solitude, right? So, and then from switching to working in Toronto, like, you are in it, you are experiencing it post, a year later, right? And so it does make it harder. I agree with Himesh. It's harder. It's difficult. You want to do things right, right? Because everyone's had this visceral experience of loss, this experience of solitude, of challenge between, your family dynamic and, connection and lack of connection that you're experiencing over the course of those, that year. So it just made you question it even more, and want something more that I think these characters are seeking. And I think that we want, for ourselves.
Right. I'm glad you speak about connection, since that is such a huge theme in this show. This series blends its timelines so seamlessly, but as it does, it results in many of you never or like hardly ever interacting with each other. How did you build that community, that sense of community as artists, despite not sharing like a scene space? Mackenzie, can you speak to that? Because you are kind of an island to yourself a little bit for much of the series. You are in your own existence.
Yeah. I met Danielle Friday night. And she's like the person, and we weren't emailing or talking, which I don't know if that, but like we just didn't know each other, and we shot these different parts of the series. And I think that was I always feel weird when you like share the storytelling of a large piece of fiction and you never actually interact. I don't think it's like essential. It doesn't matter that Danielle and I knew each other because we don't know each other in the show, but it is like, this was a very sort of profoundly intense experience, and to have a part of it that you never touched was always quite odd. So as far as the like larger community of actors and artists telling this story, some of it we all just sort of like did our pieces and then sort of set sail and let them float to the other side of the shore, or whatever a better metaphor for that would be. But while we were on the show, there's this sort of party line that it was so nice to go to work because you got to like go and create art and be around people all of a sudden. But it was kind of sad also to go to work because even though you took your mask off, nobody else did, and you couldn't get to know the crew, and we're like, or you had a shield on and there was a strange effect of light going in your eyes when you'd walk in this dark hallway where you couldn't see anybody. Like I would get really probably inappropriately close to people's faces to like try and identify them. So there was a lot of like kind of physically reaching towards each other, I felt, of like trying to bridge this like chasm that had been created by the pandemic, even if we were in scenes together, to be like, what are you doing tonight in this town that we all live in alone in our house? Like just really trying to process the enormity of the thing in whatever safe way there was, but all being quite overwhelmed by the enormity of the moment in which we made the show.
I'd add, I think that's the kind of comfort in it. There are legacies that we build that we have no idea what they will mean or do for others. And that's the relationship that Miranda has with Kirsten, right? Mm-hmm. And I got to work with Matilda, but it was just for that flick of a moment, but it propels this greater thing in the story. So you never know how your vector will intersect with anybody else, but it's there and that energy is valuable. I think that's something that the show tells us too.
Hell yeah. No, absolutely. Miranda, Danielle, I was going to ask you about that.
It's me.
Yeah, it's you. Miranda is such a catalyst. She is this agent of change for all of these people who aren't necessarily aware of it. How was that tell me about your understanding of Miranda. Tell me about who you found her to be as a person and what drives her.
Oh, we did a lot of collaborative building on the character Miranda, Patrick and Hero and I. Miranda is essentially a survivalist. She is someone who's been impacted deeply by personal trauma, and that has constructed a certain kind of a world for her, and the way she engages with people. It's made it difficult for her to have true relationships. But the way that she navigates that is through her art. And her art is not intended to be consumed by others. Her art is intended to develop her interior self, to navigate why and how she has become who she is. And so all through her life, she's trying to get to this relationship that she has with her husband, the relationships that she's, more so in backstory, that she's, squandered and fucked up, to say the least. Sorry, Matilda. She's come to a place finally when we meet her of having reckoned with it, of having fully architected why she has been the way she has. And she's just done it at the wrong time, or at a time where the things don't cross anymore, and the world decides to erupt in a way that yields the fruits of her labor for others. So that's who she is. She's just trying to seek connection, and she sought connection at a time where others weren't necessarily as aware of it, and then they become aware of it in the aftermath of this virus.
Absolutely. Matilda, I swear I know you're there. I lit up like a Christmas tree when you logged on to this chat. How did you find playing Kirsten? Were there challenging elements that you ran up against? Were there things about her that didn't necessarily make sense to you, or did you feel pretty keyed into that character the whole time?
Well, I'm so glad that you got excited when I came onto the Zoom. I mean, first of all, like, for someone my age to be able to play a character like Kirsten is really like one in a million. Like, I get so many different auditions, but a lot of the time they're like the same, and they're, Daddy, help me. But Kirsten was just so much there. I could explore so much with her, and it was really just amazing that I got to, experience like this new type of character. She's got a lot of layers, and she goes through a journey, definitely, and she goes through a lot of different things, and I had to tap into like a lot of loss too, because she goes through a lot of traumatic things, and she loses everyone she loves, and she finds it again and again, but she loses it again, and it's this whole loop. So yeah, I found it was a very emotional experience, trying to, recall all the times that, I had to tap into that. But I don't know, I'm really glad that I got to do that. Like, even though it was hard, I don't know, I don't know if that made sense.
Oh, it made total sense. That was great. Himesh and actually Matilda too. So much of this show is built on the back of the relationship that Jeevan and Kirsten have. How early in the process, in the casting process, did you meet each other? And what was it like to sort of build that chemistry between the characters?
We met doing a chemistry read when Matilda hadn't yet got the part. And so she was one of a handful of actresses that I did a chemistry read with. And I mean, she was just top of the class by a country mile. And so I think that probably informed the work we later went on to do, because we knew each other from so early on. So we've known each other now for over 2 years. We met in October 2019. That would have been when we did that chemistry read. And then it's been almost 2 years now since we shot episode 1. And I'm super proud of the work we did in episode 1, because I think there's just a connection that I don't think I would have been able to manufacture with an actress who wasn't Matilda, basically. You know, I think that there was just something, a warmth, a connection between us that I just think really helped solidify that relationship and allowed us to take the turns that we do in episode one, and for us to buy the fact that you know, that Kirsten would trust him, this guy that she just met, who's, by the way, she's witnessed him do an insane thing, like jumping on stage trying to save a guy when he doesn't actually know CPR, you know, that sort of thing. We had to navigate the truth in that relationship, but I think we found a real gem with Matilda, and I think that really helped take that journey, you know, where it went.
Yeah, well, we also found a real gem with Himesh, because it was really, he was such a generous actor to work with. And I don't know, I'm really glad that I got to meet him like 2 years before everything, because I think it would have been harder to like meet him after COVID, because like, even though the actors had their masks off, it still felt like there was this barrier kind of. So I'm glad that we got to, you know, have time to formulate our relationship. But also, I don't know, it was just off the bat, it was just really nice. And I felt like, I don't know, we kind of were both similar to our characters in some ways. So I feel like, I don't know, we kind of fit.
That's amazing. Oh, and all that shows up on screen. So you guys killed it. Mackenzie, so we're all products of our environment. And with Kirsten, it really shows. How did you calibrate that character within yourself? She has this blend of still like childlike emotions while also having to be this ferocious warrior in order to stay alive for the last 20 years. How did you find her within yourself?
Well, I think first, I mean, Matilda really kind of originated the character. I saw dailies of her doing her work in January and February of 2020 while I was working on another movie in Pittsburgh, and was like seeing what she was doing. And then obviously we had quite a long break, then came back in January. And the first episode that we all shot together was episode 7, where I am sort of bearing witness to my own life. And that was a fluke, I think, that we shot that first for me, but it was like the greatest gift you could have been given, because you get this sort of real world exposure therapy to everything that happened to you as a child, and you have these really tangible memories of what happened. And I think what's really special about Matilda and her approach to the character, that interests me generally, is like what happens to a child that's wise beyond her years when she's the years where it makes sense to be that wise. Like Matilda's actually not precocious, which is lovely, but I mean, what happens to the precocious child when they're just old enough to behave the way they should behave? And I think there is this sort of, you grow up too fast and you take up too much responsibility. So you have this extreme sort of stability, maturity, and the burden and the weight of caretaking. But also there's part of you that didn't grow up at the right pace and is still sort of arrested in that time and looking for your mom and dad who won't answer your text messages. And that those two things kind of have to live within a person. And I think the other side of Kirsten that Patrick and I located pretty early on, that, I mean, was just a nice sort of idea to come back to, is that the things that make her a good actor are the same things that make her a good warrior or protector. That like it's instinct, it's allowing that instinct to run purely through her and not to interfere with second guessing, but to hear a noise and stab, or to, you know, hear a line and respond in the moment. And I think that's really a beautiful idea, that everything's living in this sort of life or death space, whether it's like art for her or life or death. And yeah, so I guess that whole mud of it, but mostly it was that I was shooting episode 7 first and seeing Matilda, watching her be affected, me living through the adult watching her be affected, and then just feeling that sort of like lostness for too long.
Right. Matilda, how was it working with Mackenzie on the other half of your character, and how was filming episode 7? Was that particularly difficult for you?
I mean, first of all, it was amazing. I cannot say this enough. It was amazing being able to work as the younger version of Mackenzie, and being able to have that one episode where we get to actually cross storylines it was really cool and was really fun. And I don't know, it kind of it wasn't too hard to both be connected, because I think off the bat we sort of knew Kirsten and who she was just deep down, so we kind of were connected in that way already. And then and also Kirsten, we're at two very different parts of Kirsten's storyline, so Mackenzie knew about all the things that she read the scripts and knew all the Kirsten's past that I was representing or whatever, so she knew that, and she was able to form a whole different version of Kirsten as an adult, with keeping in mind all of the things that she'd been through. And I don't know, that's amazing. Can't even it's and then I don't know, episode 7, it was one of my favorite episodes to film, probably because it just felt like two completely different of my favorite things were combining. I don't know how to say it, but I'm really glad that happened. And yeah, it was really fun.
It was.
That's amazing. Himesh, you were also there for episode 7. And I imagine that was an emotionally draining on you too, based on the content of the episode. What was your experience like, even though you weren't meeting a past or future version of yourself?
Well, it's funny. I mean, you say that, but it felt a bit like I was picking up a point in my past, because episode 1, of course, ends with Jeevan entering the apartment and shutting the door. And then I didn't get to go back to that apartment for another year. And it felt like I was just waiting to pick that up. And I spoke to Naban, who plays my brother, and we walked back onto the set in January of 2021. And it felt like the entire year of COVID and the lockdown and everything that had happened in our lives had just sort of disappeared and compressed into nothing. And here we were again, just picking up our story and picking up our characters. And so there was something really emotional about that, walking into a space that had been present in our minds for so long, that we as actors and inhabiting characters had sort of made into a home of some sort. And we were now returning to that home in some way. It was really, I found it quite moving as well. And also just to finally be restarting the show. That was when we began Station 11 again. And it was really great to finally be doing that. And it was really, again, the way that Mackenzie said that it was a sort of a gift for her for that to be the first thing that we shot. For me as well, it was that, because we were all in the same space together. It was me, it was Naban, it was Matilda, it was Mackenzie as well. And we were all supporting each other in different ways. We were getting to know each other, of course. I'd only met Mackenzie once before then. So, it was a really great way to start the journey again. And I loved working with Lucy, our director, on that. And it really felt like I was taking Jeevan to the next step, but also answering the question that everyone's going to be asking at the end of episode 1, which is what happened in those 80 days, which also I had that question. Patrick had given me some ideas in January of 2020, but of course, he was still formulating the exact story of it all. And so it was kind of exciting to finally be getting into the answer of what that, of what happened.
Right. Danielle, I get so sad.
Me too. I'm about to cry now. I'm emotional.
I get so sad thinking about Miranda by herself, because she is such an iconoclast. What is it about her, though, as an artist and as a human, that people respond to on such a profound level? She creates this story that becomes in many ways a religion. Like, why is she able to speak to that? What did you find in her? What was it just her damage, or was it something more?
I don't think it's just damage, because, like at this time in which we're filming, Bell Hooks has passed literally yesterday. And I was not reading Bell at the time in which we were filming, but everything about what Bell Hooks theoretically speaks about is truly indicative of how Miranda begins to navigate this world. She is one who is reckoning with sorrow, deep sorrow and grief. And you cannot connect with people until you have reckoned with yourself, with that sorrow. You have to accept that. You have to move with that in a way, right? And she accepts the solitude that comes with. She knows she can't be a true love and a present love for Arthur until she deals with herself, until she deals with her damage, with her wreckage. And she goes off and she does that, right? You don't see what that is, but you know that she does it because she completes it. And she brings it back to him to say, I've done what I needed to do. Yes or no to whatever our future is, but I've done what I've needed to do. And I think that's what the pandemic has forced people to literally do. That's why, some Americans are not really trying to deal with it, or even, just anybody globally. Like, people have had a really difficult time reckoning with the fact that you can't be around people the way that you sought. You've taken people and used the presence of them in a manipulative capacity rather than a true loving one. And so I think that Miranda is a warrior of sorts. And that's an admirable thing to look upon. It's a dangerous thing to look upon too. And I think and she comes to accept her faults and essentially vomit them out in 3. And we yearn for that, and we fear that at the same time. It's gruesome and it's beautiful, and it's something that you can't take your eyes away from, I think.
Mackenzie, speaking as another artist within the world of this show, Kirsten continues in acting, which we know she had a passion for as a child. What is it, do you think, that she gets from that? What does it provide for her, and why is it important to stay in that space for your character?
It seems like not a choice. I think a lot of the show deals with like fate, benevolent powers, caretaking, and free will, and what we decide to do in the moment. And I think Kirsten on the stairwell in episode 1 saying, I'm an actor, like, that's what I've always, wow, I should really know this line by heart. But if you know it, Matilda, that would be great. But, do you know it?
Matilda should really know it by heart.
Yeah,
to be fair.
Matilda, this is on you, actually.
Yeah, okay, but let me think.
The idea of, I know what I want to do, and then later in the episode, how sad is it not to know what you want to do? I love that there's like, it's such a simple, that I think in another, kid's hands is a really precocious, annoying thing to say. And then that she makes good on that promise after the world falls apart is like such a beautiful truth, that she's just been drawn and tethered to this thing as a way of understanding the world, and not as this being the only art form. I mean, obviously Station 11 is, and like interpreting and reappropriating and understanding how to like mutate and transform art is part of her whole she does it as a child. She's a writer, she's a director, she becomes an actor as an adult, or she continues that journey and then also becomes a director again. I don't know. I like that it's storytelling, and everybody in this show is using storytelling to create a way to understand the world and a map. And I love, I love that we're still excavating Shakespeare for new meanings and new sort of frameworks for understanding love and loss in the world. And she's still excavating Station 11 to find a framework for her life and her loss, because it was the thing that was available to her when she experienced the greatest loss. I don't know. I think it kind of comes down to intuition and just this like purity of intention. Again, that there is this sort of instinct and intention that she follows without needing to question why still be an actor in 2040 after the world falls apart, because that's what she does, and that's what she's always done, and they tell stories.
That's amazing.
I remember the line.
What is it?
Okay.
It's acting is what I love most in the world too. Because
There you go.
Yeah.
And she
love
doesn't stop. It's not tied to any one thing. It's what she loves most in the world, and end of sentence. Like, it's an evergreen truth, which is really lovely, that you don't need the framework of, I don't know, a larger audience. You can be a movie star when the world ends. It's just from town to town.
True. Himesh, when we first meet Jeevan, he seems a little aimless, and it does take him a little bit throughout the series to find his path. As someone who's been consistently working as an actor since he was 17, was that an unfamiliar feeling for you? Did it take you some time to find that within yourself?
I wish I struggled to find the aimlessness, but it was right there. Yeah, it's funny. It's funny that you make that assumption, maybe, or comparison. But I found myself in a situation where I was like working before I'd even made like a conscious choice, really. So there's been a lot of time where I've sort of been drifting between, do I like this? Do I love this? Obviously, I do love it, and that's why I continue to do it. But there were moments of feeling aimlessness. So. But there was the thing with me with Jeevan is that I just recognized him straight away, and so yes, the aimlessness was close to the surface, but the insecurities, the feeling that there was definitely with him, there's a sense of masculinity, of what he thinks a man should be. You know, a man should rescue, should care. All these notions of masculinity that I think he expects of himself, which are then subverted ultimately because he sets himself up for a fall, I think, because he expects so much of himself that he just needs to do enough. You know, he needs to realize that he's enough, and that his qualities are, that he does have these qualities, but that he doesn't need to rescue anyone. As someone tells him later in his story, that he's a healer. You know, he can jump on a stage and try and save someone. That might not necessarily be the correct move, even though it does end up sort of being the correct move ultimately. But there is a care, there is a goodness in him, and I think I've definitely been down a lot of those sort of, you know, rabbit holes with myself, of sort of going, am I doing the right thing? Is this the right thing? You know, so there was a lot that I recognized with Jeevan, for sure.
I love that. That's beautiful. And I think my favorite thing about this panel is how much all of your stories and your responses and your emotional experiences come together in a circular fashion. You are all connected, even in your disconnectedness. A testament, I think, to how wonderful this show is and how amazing your performances are. But I regret to say, I must let you go. Now, thank you so much for joining me here today and being willing to talk about to be willing to talk about this show with such care. On behalf of the SAG-AFTRA Foundation, I want to thank you for sharing your experiences, process, and craft with your fellow performers.
Thank you so much.
Libby.
Thank you.